Yeah, hello everyone.
Hi everyone. Hi German. How's it going?
Hi Joe, I'm great. Thanks to have us here for the first online Flutter meetup.
Yeah, no problem at all. Happy to have you here. So to all the live audience out there, welcome to the Google Developer Space channel. And thank you for tuning in to our first collaboration with Flutter Singapore community. Just a quick introduction for some of you who have not heard of us. As you know, we are a platform for developers and startups from around the region to learn, connect, engage, and be inspired. We want to empower and connect the community to our people, program, networks, and technology, be it online or in person. Today, we are super excited as we have Flutter Singapore with us, led by German. So thanks, German, for bringing such a great line of speaker for us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here as well. Thank you for Google Developer Space for this help to organize and to set up this whole infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's our first online meetup. Today, we are going to have 3 talks. It will take about 30 minutes per talk. And after that, if you guys will have more questions to our guest speakers, we'll have a parking lot, maybe 15 minutes after all talks, where the rest of questions might be asked. And yeah.
So everyone, please drop your comments or questions that you may have for Flutter Singapore or for all the speakers today in the live chat, and then German will get to it.
Yeah. So thank you, Joe. Let's prepare for our first talk. It will be Joe. Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Hi, German. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
How are you for circuit breaker?
Oh, like it's almost a few months in this. However, it's pretty good, and I think after small pause, finally we have like our Flutter meetup. So, what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, so today I'm going to share about my journey with the Dart and Flutter as a front-end engineer.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that, and then please go. Stage is yours.
Sure, thank you. So hello guys, so my name is John. You can call me Zhuoran as well. I'm a front-end team lead at Indoas. So we cover most of the client-facing products, including a React web app and some Node.js app server. And also recently we added Flutter to our mobile stack. But today I'm going to cover my journey and experience with the Dart and Flutter from a front-end engineer's perspective. And I hope we can give you some confidence if you are looking to pick up Flutter with your front-end background. Okay. So first of all, I want to give a background about our company. We are Indoas, the only Singapore financial technology company that can manage people's CPF money. We are licensed by MAS, and we provide institutional quality financial products at the lowest cost possible. So the reason why we pick up Flutter is that in late 2019, we did some research. We planned to do a mobile app. We checked out native development and React Native and also Flutter. The reason why we eventually pick up Flutter is that Flutter gave us a hybrid solution, so which is very cost efficient for startups, and you only need to write the code once, but deploy it to both iOS and Android with a native performance. So native performance is very important here. And also our designer and product manager are okay to have a consistent design tune across iOS and Android. So we don't have many platform-specific UIs. And the last thing is that we checked out Flutter. It was in stable release, and it's constantly evolving. There are more and more libraries within the ecosystem and more active contributors. So we are confident to choose Flutter as a solution for our mobile app. So before I kick off on the technology part, the theoretical part, I want to give you some previews of what we have been building. So this is just a few screens. We definitely build more, but I want to give you a sense of how the animation can be done within Flutter and how smooth the scrolling is, the complicated animation is. So this is this thanks to the power of Flutter. So we achieved it in just 2 months. And Before that, I also want to talk about some of my background so that you can have some comparison and a contrast to yourself. So you probably will gain a lot of confidence. So you can know that, oh, you can also pick up Flutter in a short period of time. So I started as a full stack or backend developer in a US bank. I was working in equity research team, mostly on Java and Slang, which is a domain-specific language. The programming styles was mostly OOP in Java and FP in Slang. So then I joined a startup. Most of my work was on React and Redux with JavaScript and Node.js. Then later on, I joined some companies and then landed at Indoas. So I picked up TypeScript, and also we have a lot of usage of Redux Saga as well. And sometimes I do Python to write some utility scripts. So I do have some hybrid experience with the React Native in my previous job, which is about 5 months in production. So, but overall, I have very limited knowledge about native development when I started Flutter. So the first thing I want to share is about the UI system. So today I want to give you some information about how some React or web development knowledge can be transferred to Flutter development. So the first thing is about the component and the widget. The most common thing between these two is that they are all declarative. I think it's a trend for client-facing application development. So you focus more on how to configure your UI. You don't focus on the painting part. You let the rendering engine handle it for you. So in React, we call it component. In Flutter, we call it widget. And in iOS, they introduced the Swift UI, which is actually also encouraged by this kind of reactive development pattern for UI, I believe. So as I said, for component and a widget, you focus more on the configuration part over the painting result. And eventually, your component in React or your widget in Flutter will be translated to some fundamental elements that will be painted in the rendering engine. So for React, eventually it will become a DOM tree, as you can see in the left side. And for Flutter, eventually it will be a render object from the widget to element that render object in the Flutter engine. So this concept is pretty similar across these two frameworks, or I'll say development in the development experience. So I was pretty comfortable to pick up Flutter to develop the widget there. And every render object in Flutter has a unique ID. You can use it to locate your widget. You can use it to observe whether your widget has been re-rendered, has been destroyed. And the next thing is something slightly different between React and Flutter, is that in React, because it controls manipulate the DOM, and HTML DOM, updating it is quite expensive. So in React, they implement something called React Fiber. It's a heuristic algorithm to compile virtual DOM. So within the virtual DOM, within React, they do certain thing called reconciliation. So they compile what should be updated in the actual DOM. And then they only update the part that need to be updated to improve the performance. And there is also a concept called a virtual tree and native tree for React Native for mobile, a similar concept. But for Flutter is slightly different. There's no concept of virtual DOM. So I will use these two graphs to illustrate why Flutter is such a powerful framework. So as you can tell, in React Native or React, there is a, let's talk about React Native only here. So for React Native, there is an OEM widget provided within the iOS or Android ecosystem in the platform itself, in the SDK. But React Native, to control that, they have to implement a bridge layer, which is in the middle between JavaScript and the OEM widget. So basically, your JavaScript code manipulates the OEM widget within your native platform through this bridge. There is some communication overhead. That's one of the reasons why animation once was a challenge topic for React Native. And for Flutter, as you can tell, it takes over the canvas from the platform and everything that is within your render engine inside your Flutter app. So one benefit of that is you don't care about backward compatibility, because you know regardless is iOS 11 or iOS 12 or iOS 13, as long as it can run the Flutter engine, you can render your widgets properly because you don't rely on any OEM widgets. But one concern people has raised is that oh, what if iOS implement a new widget or new look and feel of the UI? How soon will Flutter be able to adopt it? I think we should be confident because the community is getting bigger. And I believe Google is investing heavily into this framework. So they should be able to adopt the new UIs quickly into Flutter in the widget, in the native widget. But only time will tell, so let's see. And this graph, these pictures demonstrates the difference of the virtual DOM part. So Flutter, as you can tell, there is no bridge layer, no virtual DOM inside of the rendering process. So the painting anything on canvas is absolutely controlled within your app. That's why it's powerful and the animation is constantly 60 FPS most of the time. And regarding the reconciliation I talked about, inside the React, there is a heuristic algorithm, as I mentioned, which is an ON algorithm to compare the difference of the widget, of the components, whether you should re-render or not. So well, the first thing is that the two element types should produce different trees. So basically, they check the instance types, whether the instances are the same or not. If the instances are different, everything in the subtree will be destroyed and will be repainted from the DOM or from the native widget. And the second thing is that in React, we have a concept called a key prop. For example, if you have a list of items, you are sorting the list, and if you have a key, then React will know, oh, the order of the item has changed because they find out the sequence of the key has changed. So if you check out the Flutter source code of the widget, there is a function called can update. So it exactly implements what React reconciliation documentation was talking about. Firstly, you compare whether the runtime of the old and new widget tree are equals, and then you check the key. So I believe Flutter has a lot of inspiration or got a lot of encouragement from how React implement this reconciliation process. And next thing that is similar across React and Flutter is life cycle. So they have this concept called life cycle, but the exact life cycles are slightly different. I would tell some of my personal opinions about them. So first of all, in React, if you don't think about functional components in React, if you only talk about class components in React, they have stateless component and stateful component, which is exactly the same as Flutter. As the name can tell, stateful component means you can maintain some local state and you can mutate your local state. Every time when your local state is mutated, the render function in React will be triggered. The build function in Flutter widget will be triggered. And also we have some comparison life cycles in React, like should component update. We have update life cycles like component did update, component will unmount. There are something similar in Flutter, like did change dependencies, mounted and dispose, deactivate, also initial state. So one thing I want to highlight is that in Flutter, there's some function, there's a method called add poster frame callback. This is not part of the lifecycle of Flutter. However, it's very handy and useful in your day-to-day development because for Flutter, once you are rendering a widget, you cannot mutate the state. In React, it's not encouraged to set state in component did update lifecycle, but somehow in React, you can still do it. Although it will give you a warning, but you can still do it. But in Flutter, if you do it, you will get a systematic error, say mark layout needed is not available during the build process, something like that, because when you are rendering your widget, Flutter does not allow you to update the widget or mark the widget dirty again. So that's why you have this add poster frame callback, which will be called exactly after every frame is painted on your screen. So you can use to achieve something that was available in component did mount from React. So the next thing I want to share is my opinion about how to determine whether a widget should be repainted in Flutter. So in React, there is something called should component update lifecycle. So in this should component update lifecycle, we can explicitly take over of the re-rendering logic. So we can say, oh, if this parameter doesn't change, then we don't re-render. If this parameter changes, then we re-render. However, in Flutter, I saw some guy asked for this feature in GitHub in 2018, but there's no following discussion. So I guess it's not on the roadmap yet. And I guess the underlying development is also a little bit different. The implementation is slightly different. So I'm not sure whether this will be feasible for us to use in the near future. So how do I control whether a component will be reviewed or not in Flutter? Most of the times, in my limited experiences so far, most of the time you don't have to control that. But if you really have to, you can use things like mark means layout, mark means build, mark means pinned to mark the relayout boundary that will be repainted or not. So relayout boundary is like a boundary to tell the rendering system, oh, if I'm going to repaint this widget, where should I start? So you can do that. And also in provider of Flutter, you have something that is very similar to the selector concept in Redux, in React. So selector, basically, you can memorize parameters. If your parameter doesn't change, then you get the same instance of the object. So you don't trigger any revender if you use selector with provider. And the next thing is that you can always make your widget constant. So if you declare constant in front of your widget, it means it will always use the same instance, even if it was rebuilt. So these are some ways I have found so far to explicitly control whether to rebuild your Flutter widget or not. So hopefully in the near future, we have some better ways, like should the component update in React lifecycle, which we can explicitly control that easily. And the last thing I want to share is that this is very transferable from web development to Flutter. It's a layout system. In web, we use CSS. In React Native, we also use something similar. We use Flexbox. We have media query. We can place elements on the absolute position on your canvas with the position absolute. And we can also rotate your elements. We can have some transformation with animations like keyframes, declare a curve, declare a twin, declare an animation interval. So all these things are replicated or have something similar, compatible, interchangeable within Flutter. Like Flutter also has the Flexbox system, has the stack, which is a replication of position absolute, similar thing, and has the transform, which can rotate your elements and adjust the metrics of your elements on the canvas. You can also declare animations with the twin as well. So this is a table I summarized for you to quickly understand like the unit in layout system of Flutter and web, and also some common elements from HTML and Flutter. So I found it was pretty a smooth transition for me from web world to Flutter because of this mapping. So for example, for media query, you have exactly similar concept. For web, you can say, oh, if the screen is larger, I want to display them in line, like this first name and last name into the box. But if the screen is narrowed, I want to stacking them. I want to stack them together in vertical line. So this is also achievable with Flutter because it has a media query. It's just that Flutter has this concept called dependency injection. So every time when you want to access something from the widget tree, you have to use media query.auth. Basically, it means I will look up from this context and find out the nearest media query instance. That's how you access a media query. So Linus once said, talk is cheap. So we have been talking about the theoretical stuff for almost 15 minutes. So I want to give you a live coding demo to illustrate how easy it is or how smooth it was to transfer from web development to Flutter. So I'm going to do a very quick demo of the layout system and the animation for the world of web. So I have this HTML DOM, which, as you can tell, there are 3 stars and there's a programmer. So now I'm going to make something for us to replicate in Flutter as well. So first of all, I want to declare this one as a flex item. So I want to align my items from flex end. So you can tell my stars will be moved to this one. And I want to say flex direction. I will say column. So it will align them in vertical lines. And then I need to give a explicitly height 400 pixel, and I give a width of 200 pixel. So now I get it. And the flex direction, align items flex end. So now I have to have this flex box. So everyone occupy one base element from the flex. Okay, oh, sorry, I have a typo here. That's why it was not vertical. And now let's give a background color. I will use the branding color of our company. And yeah, so now let's change the font size to a bigger one, which is 3 rem. Okay, so now I want to place this hiker and place this programmer at the bottom. So I just say position absolute and the bottom 0 and the right 0. So it should flow to the bottom right corner here, but it's too small. So let's increase the font size. I will say this one. Yeah, so now you have this layout, and now let's quickly animate them. So to save time, I have something that is already written. I just copy paste here. So now I declare an animation. As you can tell, it's a range from rotate 0 degree to 360 degree. And now let's declare the animation. I say my move, and I give a interval 2 seconds, and I say infinite. It means the animation, it will repeat itself. So it starts to move, and now I want to give a curve. I say linear. If linear, it should rotate in a constant speed. But if I say ease in and out, it should have some nice bouncing or ease event like a curve within that. So now we have a sense of how HTML organizes the layout and animation. Let's do the same thing in Flutter. Let's achieve exactly the same thing we want to do in Flutter. So first of all, I have a ready-to-use Flutter app here, which has a star. So first of all, I'm going to wrap it on a stack. So stack is an open space where you can flexibly place your elements. So first of all, and I place them here. And now what if I want to have a column? Because as I said, it's also using the Flexbox system. So you can do something exact similar. So now I want to give a background of it. Just say colors.blue. And now I'm going to give a cross elements column.blue. And I want to have a width with 200 and a height should be 400, exactly the same as just now. And then now, because I have this cross align element, which is same as align items in HTML, so I will say cross elements.end. As you can tell, the stars moved to the end. What if I want to give the equal space of them? So I will give them this flexible widget. I'll just copy paste them here.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
Sorry for interruption. Could you make your font a little bit bigger? I think we have requests that it's hard to...
sorry, the font or the voice?
No, the font.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
I think it's great.
Great. Okay, cool. Sorry about it. And now we have this. So as you can tell, it's still not expanding to occupy the equal space. So what happened is that we have to give it a fit. Flex fit tent. And now it should occupy the space, and you can also give the weight of it. So let's copy paste them. Now you have it expanded. So in Flutter, for your convenience, there is a shorthand, which is called expand, can achieve exactly the same thing as what we did. Okay, so now we have this layout, and lastly, I want to have an absolute position of this hiker as just now where we have this hiker on the bottom right corner. So I will do something similar. Bottom 0, right 0, and the child, I will say text. I'll give a programmer there, and now I can declare a style to make it bigger. Font size, let's say 100. Yeah, now we achieve it. So the next thing is about animation. So I will firstly transform it to a stateful widget. I never use my mouse, so I just say convert to stateful widget. My IDE will give it to me, thanks to the powerful Flutter IDE integration. And then I will mix in it with something called the single tick provider state mixing. This is necessary if you want to achieve your animation, and I can override the init state function. So now I have the state. The reason why I have this is that I want to instantiate the animation controller so that I can start to animate my widget. So I declare an animation controller, I give a duration, I say seconds, 2 seconds, and you have to pass a waythink. So this is why we need a mix-in of single tick provider, because waythink is the way of how your screen scan the tube. That's how it works for a monitor. You can check out more online. Now I have this animation controller, and now I want to declare a curve so that my animation will work within certain curves. So I have some code prepared to save our time. I'll just copy paste it. So now I declare a curve. And this curve, as you can tell, is an in and out curve, which is built in from Flutter, exactly the same as this web curve. And now I have a twin. So twin is like a scaling of the value based on your animation controller. So it will have a range from 0 degree to 360 degree. And I need to declare the local value of it. So now we have everything we need for animation. I will transform this widget to an animated widget. One way you can do it is to use an animated builder widget. And you can have a child. The next thing I want to do is to have a builder. I will declare a builder, and the first is context. The next one is widget. And then you can say I want to return a transform rotate. So everything is built in. I didn't do any magic here. I'm not even using anything that was customized by myself. So I will say max.pi and divide by 180 because this is an angle. So you need to transform your degree to angle with the pi. So this one I need to import Dart math. You will love this library when you start to write Flutter. It will appear in your day-to-day life. And the next thing, I want to pass the animation, which is a twin, to this one. So now I have it. I need to do a hot restart. I think something wrong is here. It's not working because I didn't pass a widget. I'm sorry. So in rotate, I need to tell them what widget to rotate, right? So I want to rotate the child, which is this container, the 3 stars we made just now. And now I didn't start the animation. So in the initial state, this is a life cycle to start everything in a stateful widget. So I say animation controller.repeat. This basically means infinite loop of the animation. Let's do a hot restart. Yeah, as you can tell, it starts to rotate. And if you want to compare it with what we achieved on the web, it looks exactly the same. And you can change the curve to linear. So it rotates in a constant speed. Let me restart. And the same here, if I change this to a linear curve, they will rotate in a constant speed together. So because I'm sharing the screen, so the FPS on the mobile emulator doesn't look so good, but on the actual device or in the perform mode, it looks fantastic. So this is a live coding session about the Flutter UI system. So I hope after this, the web developers and the front-end engineers are more confident to pick up Flutter because of the ease of transferable skills in the layout system from web. And also for Flutter developers who came from native world, I think you should be confident to pick up Flutter Web and also React, for example, as well, because the layout system are pretty similar across these two systems. And the next thing I want to cover is the state management. So in React, in modern front-end stack, whether it's React or Angular, state management has been pretty matured. So for example, in React, you have the classic one called the Redux. So it basically follows the event sorting pattern. You have the single source of truth in a global store. Instead of recording the exact value of some elements, you record the changes, the events that trigger the mutation of your store. So from the graph here, as you can tell, if you don't use a state management tool or Redux, you'll find out there are many interdependency among your elements, among your widgets, which will become a disaster if your app grows big. And if you with something like a Redux or Mobex with a concept called store, you can control what elements should subscribe to the store. Either it's whether it's a React component or Flutter widget, it's the same concept. And also you can have a definition of what events can mutate the store, and all the subscribers will be notified. So the unique part of Redux is that everything is in a single chunk of big store. So you have one single instance. We call it a global store. So, and also you can chain different React actions, chain different events with some utilities middleware called Redux Sunk. It's also available in both React and Flutter. And the next thing is that you have something called a Mobex, which will give you a multi-store, which is slightly different from Redux, but it is still a unidirectional way of flowing your data. So it's trying to tackle the similar problem, but in a more organized way. So some people prefer Mobex as well. It's also available in both React and Flutter. I believe most of the front-end engineers in React already are familiar with these tools. And the next thing is that Flutter released a provider last year. It's something, in my view, is something very similar to the context API from React. So the concept that you have a provider, you have a consumer, and every time when your value in the provider has been changed, all the children who are subscribing or who are consuming this provider will be notified. It's the exactly same thing like React. So you can use them interchangeably in your mental model when you develop Flutter with the provider. And there are something unique in two steps. So in React, our team is highly relying on Redux Saga because it utilizes the stream, it utilizes the generator function, so we can create very complicated use cases like you can have like OTP trigger, just declare it once, and you can use it in every different processes. And to test Redux Saga is pretty easy because it uses generator function. Every step is very predictable. However, in Flutter, there is no Redux Saga. I will talk about why there's a limitation for it, but we have something called a block, business logic component, which is very similar to Redux Saga in certain extent. But I will cover more about the details in the next slides. So this is an example of block in Flutter. So as you can tell, it's used some huge syntax for generator function. Basically, in Flutter, it means it returns a string. And this one will give an event state called activity loading. And in React, on the right-hand side in the yellow box, this is the code of Redux Saga. As you can tell, both of these two implementations are implementing something which is three different states of classic API call with a loading state, success state, and a failure state with the generator function. So this is something you can easily transfer from Redux Saga to block. And what if you want to communicate among your among your resources? In Saga, you can use action channel, which to communicate between different sagas. You can also pass Saga as a parameter to another Saga, so that when you instantiate, you get access to the other sagas in one Saga. A similar thing in block. If you want to access user block from authentication block, you can pass user block as a parameter to your authentication block. That's one way. Another way is that if your app is getting larger, you want to manage them in a more predictable way. So you can use a library called getit, which is a service locator. It will create a singleton instance when you start your app, so you can access this any blocks anywhere if you put them in this service locator. So we are running out a little bit of time, so I will have two more slides to quickly cover. One is state management, that in Redux Saga, we have a concept called tick lattice and tick array. That's one of the side effects. Tick lattice means within the accumulated stream of events, you will cancel all the previous incompleted one. You only care about the latest one. So in Flutter, in block, by default, it is tick array. It consumes every single event. But if you want to consume only the latest one in your stream, what you can do is you'll use the extension from RxDart, which will add on some new method into your generic stream from Dart. like for example, in this case, we use switch map. It will drop all the previous incompleted event within the stream, and it will only consume the latest one. And the last thing about state management I want to mention is why there is a limitation to implement Saga within Dart. Because in Dart, the syntax trigger yield is a statement instead of an expression. So in JavaScript, yield is an expression, so it doesn't end a method. It doesn't end an execution. So you can have some return from yield function. You can say my result equals this, and you can continue the execution. However, in Dart, because yield is a statement itself is like a execution with a return. So you cannot continue your code after you yield. So that's why if you want to have some subsequent logic, you have to use a callback function and pass it to the yield function. So that's why I think in short period of time, Saga won't be available in Dart, because it doesn't make sense to use a lot of callback to do it, because the beautiful part about using generator function is that your code is more readable and maintainable. So internationalization, I will quickly skip that. So internationalization in React is using some AST Babel plugin, transform your code to AST and output the JSON file for the assets of your language. And it has a similar official library supported in Dart as well, developed by Google. You can achieve something similar, and it can generate the ARC file when you run the generator. I believe underneath it passes the code to AST and output it into an ARC file. So the last thing I want to cover is ready for production, because Flutter is relatively new for production usage. So we found out CI/CD. There's a good tool called CodeMagic.io, which is a startup for CI/CD. It is dedicated for Flutter CI/CD. So a lot of out-of-the-box features like sending, connecting to Apple Developer Center, and provisioning, versioning, but it doesn't have a lot of good integration like Bitrise.io. However, it has better support for Flutter comparing to Bitrise.io as of now. And the next thing, we use Google Firebase apps distribution for beta testers, and they can internally test the app without going through the Google Play Store or Apple App Store. And the next thing, we have Crashlytics and Sentry for reporting of errors or crashes, and we use Google Analytics for behavior tracking and user persona as well. One thing to note is that Mixpanel is pretty powerful for tracking and commonly used in the web, but the SDK is not available in Flutter yet. So I hope Mixpanel will pay some attention to this one and try to draw out a good SDK for us to use. So that's all about my topic today. To wrap up, I hope I gave you a sense of how web development can be easily transferred, how the skills can be transferred to Flutter quickly and be confident for it. And for native developers, I hope you get a sense of how the modern web front-end development inspired Flutter, and how the framework are similar and how they are different in certain areas. So lastly and quickly, our app is launching very soon. We are currently on a React web app. If you are willing to try out our platform, you can use this voucher code to sign up. You will get $20 free credit. So thank you. That's all about my talk today.
Very much. Guys, please post your questions in comments, and we will answer. John will answer that, and I will use like the power of host, and will ask maybe the first question. So I'm curious, how much years, how much experience do you have in React Native?
So I only had, as I said in my slides, I only had 5 months of experience in production with React Native, but I have been on React for about 4 years. Yeah.
How easy was it to switch from React Native to Flutter? Like
Right. I think it was pretty easy. For example, in my case, I think I got speed up in about 2 months. So I read a book called Flutter in Action, and after that, I didn't digest everything from them. So I just straight away to grab some code, follow some tutorial. And after 2 months, I'm pretty confident and comfortable to build complicated animations, complex layout, and the state management as well. So I think the background of React and the state management, modern frontend do help. Yeah, for me, it was about 2 months to get comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I think we have one question. So Alexei is asking, do you use single Redux state for the whole application?
So right now we are using block, as I said. So we did take a look of Redux store, and I think for now we are considering whether MobX continue with the block or switch to MobX. Because one way I found it difficult with the Redux in Flutter is that because Dart has this typing system, so if you declare everything in a single global store, to handle the type safety is pretty, it could be challenging. So that's why I would prefer either to continue on block, which the mental model is very close to Redux Saga, or we switch to MobX with the power of ArcStart and the subsequent observable stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I think there are many questions about block, but hopefully it may be just separate talk. So
Sure.
let's see. Let's take one more question. So Johnson is asking, do you have any recommendations for Flutter app testing automation?
Yes, so I think Flutter, I think Google really put an amazing effort on this ecosystem. So out of the box, you have this Flutter unit test where you can pump a widget, and it's like a React testing library for web developers. You can mimic the behavior of rendering a widget and try to find some element and do some assertion. And also for CI/CD process, there's a Flutter driver test. So you can utilize Flutter driver. You can deploy your app to like AWS device farm to run your end-to-end tests, for example. Yeah, so most of them are out of the box. And on flutter.dev, the official website, there's a good tutorial about this entire thing.
Okay, thank you. And I think the last question from 171. In terms of security, is Flutter able to have APIs to access Android Key Store and iOS Secure Enclave?
Yes, that's a very good question. I got this asked many times when I choose Flutter. So yes, in the recent development, Flutter support both keychain from iOS and Android Key Store natively. So they have this API, yeah. From official, I think it was from the official team or some community team, but it was pretty mature.
I think there is one package that is maintained by myself, Flutter Secure
really?
Store.
Nice, nice.
I'm not sure, maybe you're using it as well. Anyway, so just let me share one more comment from Sam. I think everyone thanks you. So thank you, John. Hope
thank you.
To see you next time for the next talk. So let's continue then. Okay. Hi, Harris.
Hi, German.
So I would like to introduce Happy Harris. He's one of our, hopefully you wouldn't be insult, oldest speaker for Flutter Meetup group. Harris gave the first talk, I think, more than a year and a half ago. So today you'll continue with what topic?
So I'm going to talk about providers, advanced providers.
Okay, so John started with Block, Redux, MobX, and you'll continue with another state pattern. Okay, so please go on.
All right, so thank you for inviting me to this live stream, and thank you guys for watching this live stream. So today what I'm going to talk about is how to use advanced providers. So a little bit about me before I start. I'm a YouTuber, like a full-time YouTuber. My YouTube channel is the Happy Harris, and I also built a Udemy course on Flutter also. All right, so that's about me for now, but let's get on with providers. So what is a provider? So if you go to the provider documentation or even the pubdev website, simply is a wrapper for inherited widget. So some of you might think, what is an inherited widget? So for the longest time, I didn't know what's inherited widget. So an inherited widget helps you to pass data across your widget tree. So simply you have a data maybe at the top of your widget tree and you want somewhere at the bottom or the third branch of your widget tree to access that data. So inherited widget helps you in allowing to pass some data in across your widget tree. So why use provider? Well, you've inherited widget, there's a lot of boilerplate. Provider helps us by reducing some boilerplate, and it also has a standard way to get data. So the difference between like the lines of code from an inherited widget and from a provider, you could see it's very stark. Like there's a huge difference in terms of code. So on your left side, it is how you implement an inherited widget. So I used to be a software developer in a startup and I had a lot of inherited widget, and just maintaining it, it's very it took a lot of effort. But once provider was created, right, it made a lot of sense to just use provider because it cuts a lot of boilerplate and you're able to use many providers in any way you can. And the standard way for you to use a provider is just by at the bottom right, provider.auth with the type of data that you're passing through and context. Sorry, that's an error. I forgot a semicolon, but yeah, bear with me here. So this is how you usually get data from a provider. So by calling this, it's very simple and it's even readable. So I'm going to just glance through the different providers, and I'm going to also at the same time going to talk about the more advanced. So stream providers, I would say it's very simply like a stream builder plus a provider. So an example that you guys might use is Firebase user. So Firebase user, you probably need its UID to access any data from Firestore, right? So you probably use a stream builder for you to get whether the user is logged in or logged out, and then you can use it in this simple on all state change stream. So it's like a stream builder plus provider, and then your other widgets down the line is able to get the Firebase user object. So I think this is hopefully a common provider that you guys use. Another common provider that you guys have used is this multi-provider. So you can have different types of provider put into one multi-provider. So for myself, I use this multi-provider at the top of the widget tree. So I have my stream builder, I have like maybe a proxy provider, which I will explain later, and I will have my change notifier provider, which I'm also going to explain later on. So all of these providers, usually most of the time, you will put it at the top of your widget, maybe just after your material app widget that you have created, and then you have your multi-provider, and the rest of your widget tree will be able to get the data once you put in any types of providers. So the next one is proxy provider 0. So there's a difference with proxy provider and proxy provider 0. So there is 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I had a video on my YouTube channel that's called Easiest Way to Create a Dark Mode for any app. So how is this implemented is basically you get the platform brightness from your, for example, iOS phone, whether it is in dark mode or light mode. And then you can use it to see whether it is dark mode. And then if you have a theme that you want to pass down through your different widgets, then you can use a proxy provider 0 to pass down the theme in your, for example, calculator app that I have here. Whoops, sorry about that. So I think this is the best way, because for the material theme, it doesn't have, like, for example, shadow color that can pass through the material theme data. So that's why I created my own like neumorphic theme. So yeah, so this is how you usually use a proxy provider. So what's the difference between a proxy provider and a normal provider? A provider doesn't update, but a proxy provider does. So once, for example, if your phone is in light mode, it will actually change the, for example, in this context, the theme of your phone. So that's why I feel that proxy provider is a very good provider if you want to listen to a data that changes dynamically. So this is another way for you to use proxy provider. As you can see, the difference is that there is no number. So this proxy provider will actually listen to another provider inside a multi-provider. So you see here, there is the previous example, the stream provider that we use the Firebase user. And then we will have the proxy provider that listens to the user, Firebase user that we have created over here. So this will return a links collection, or like a, what do you call that? A Firestore collection that we can use it in the later part of your app. So you can use this proxy provider like this, and basically it just manipulates whatever data that you need, and then you can just pass it down the widget tree. And this is how I explain proxy provider visually using Firebase authentication. So you could see over here at the top, this orange box, right? You have this multi-provider that you usually create at the top of your widget tree. And this is how I perceive like your multi-provider, like a box. And then the different shapes are your different widgets that are listening to this multi-provider. So inside this multi-provider, you have your Firebase authentication and proxy provider. So that means you have a stream provider, a proxy provider. And then let's zoom it in. And inside the multi-provider, you have this proxy provider that's listening to this user over here. So the stream provider actually will give us the user object once the user log in, for example. So once it does, then the user will be passed in to the proxy provider. Some animations here and there. I shouldn't do a slide, but then once the user is logged in, right, then the proxy provider will get the user object. And then inside the proxy provider, we will manipulate the user object to get, for example, a UID. And then this UID will be passed down in the different widgets that's listening to this multi-provider. So that's how you can use the proxy provider. Hopefully that explains clearly on this. Right, the next I'll call this is a bit advanced provider is this thing called change notifier proxy provider. So I'm going to explain in terms of the context of Cloud Firestore. So for example, if you were to do without any providers, right? If you want to add a list item, you'll have this add item button over here. So what it does is that, okay, I'm going to call my parent widget, my app bar, for example. And then after that, my app bar will then call my catalog to update how much list item I have. So once that's done, I will have update my, for example, a column of list item. And then I will have a new item over here. So that's another reason why you should use providers, because you could see that you need to jump a lot of steps for you to just add something, right? So another thing that you can use is also this thing called change notifier. So change notifier is not part of the provider package. It is already created inside the material package in Flutter, if I'm not wrong. So how this change notifier helps is that it gives a huge shortcut for you. So you will have an add item, and then you will just call it inside the change notifier. Then it will update my catalog using this function called notify listeners, which will update the UI accordingly, and then it will add the new item here. So now, what if we want to have the change notifier to be updated by the Cloud Firestore? So I had this case where I wanted to listen to the Cloud Firestore at the same time, but change notifier doesn't get updated. It will just remain the same and nothing happens. Because for example, if I want to have a bunch of list item inside my Cloud Firestore and suddenly there's a change, and the only thing that's helping me to change the different list items presented in the Flutter app is a change notifier, it doesn't really help. So the only way for you to do it is to use a proxy provider, because proxy provider is I think the only provider that allows you to update your different UI widgets accordingly from the outside source. So meaning that other than the internal widgets updating itself, other services like Cloud Firestore is able to, update the change notifier accordingly. So there's this huge thing called change notifier proxy provider. It's an actual provider widget. Yes. Don't be scared. It is pretty simple. So what this change notifier proxy provider does is that if you were to look at it, for example, it stores a state of 4, and then after that, the Cloud Firestore updates it. Okay, instead of 4 list items, we will have 5 list items instead. So what it does is that it will get the updated data, and then it will just update it to the number 5. So once it has updated data from the Firestore or any services, right, then it will actually call the my catalog to update its UI, and then you have a new item over here. Then this is how it looks like actually. So for example, if you have the add item to add another item in your catalog, it will update the UI. If the Cloud Firestore have an increased number of, for example, new item, it will also update the UI. So change notifier actually updates according to the user interaction and the Cloud Firestore interaction. So I have another example of a real use case that I personally use. So there is this thing called Linktree. So what Linktree does is that it solves the problems of having an Instagram account, but you want to share more than one link. So I personally love the idea, and I think to myself, like, I think this is a very simple app to be created. So instead, I use Flutter Web for me to implement this thing. So there is this use case where if you see correctly the LinkedIn and YouTube, it changes over here, and then it also changes over here. So I changed the position of my YouTube and LinkedIn link, and then it will also update the UI in the website itself. So I was thinking, I think this is fairly simple for me to create in Flutter Web. So this is how it looks like visually. So first thing is that the user will change the position of the links inside the website itself or an app. Then this will update the positions. The updated position will be saved locally. So my local storage or my cache or whatever will be saved locally. And then after that, inside the database in the cloud storage, it will be updated. And then in my, I call it Linktree landing page, will be also updated. So there's a lot of things going on when you change the position of your button over here. So I was thinking, how am I going to, replicate this user flow? So in the end, I used this change notifier proxy provider. So by having a simple widgetry over here, I have a change notifier proxy provider, and then I will change my button positions, which will then update in my change notifier proxy provider. And then this will then update the Firestore database, for example. And after that, it will change in my phone UI over here. So change notifier proxy provider helps in terms of not having like a jagged kind of workflow, because if I don't use change notifier proxy provider, there will be a loading string to say that, oh, I'm updating the Firestore, and then it looks ugly, or the user experience is not very nice for any users using the app. So I find that change notifier proxy provider really helps. All right, so I'll give you an example on how I did it here. So you can see I've implemented something similar over here. So for example, if I were to change the Earth and what is this bomb here, right? So if I change the position, right? So this is a reorderable list view. So if I change the position over here, it saves locally, and then my Firestore changes here at the same time. So this interaction doesn't have any loading or whatsoever. It just seamlessly update without any loading or any disruption of any user experience. So I think this is pretty cool. So I have a Udemy course that teaches you how to do this. So check it out. All right. So in terms of code, right, I have with me the button settings. So I divided this as a preview part of the screen, and this is called the button settings. So inside my button settings, I have with me here the change notifier proxy provider. So this will have the list of links, which is these links over here. And then I have a links notifier. So I use a change notifier over here. So one thing that I was a bit, this is just my UX thing, is just because my change notifier is being presented second, but the naming is change notifier first. So that's, yeah, but either way, it still works. So change notifier proxy provider requires two things. It requires your notifier, your change notifier in your create parameters, and under your update parameter, it uses your links notifier to update according to what changes you have, like for example, your Firestore. So this user links actually is from the Firestore itself. So let's look into the links notifier, which is basically a simple change notifier. And what it does is I have like a working list and I have an update method to say that if there's new updates, then I will override the existing list to the user links over here. Then you will see this on reorder. So you will need this on reorder for this reorderable list view, because once it changes, right, then you have to, for example, update Firestore or whatsoever. So I have created an on reorder function for my change notifier over here. So what it does is basically it will just update the UI using notify listeners. This is just what you will normally do when you change your list items. And then after that, like I said earlier, it will notify listeners, which will just internally saves the current working list positions. And then at the same time, after it saves locally, I will save it in Firestore. So I use batch. Batch is a little bit overkill, but basically it batches up all your reads functions. So, or read or update functions. So you have, like, for example, update data, and then I just update my position using the current index, and then I commit it. So with this on reorder function, right, I can just put it under my, where is it, reorderable list view. So another thing that I didn't go through is consumer. So you can think of consumer as a builder widget, but specifically for provider. And what consumer does is that it will only change the UI of the widget. So it only rebuilds the child or the builder widget. So it doesn't rebuild the whole screen. So that's advantage of consumer, if I'm not wrong. And then after that, you can use the reorderable list view. And then with the function that we had created earlier, which is called on reorder. Then with that, you can already just implement this simple, I would say, I think this is simple, user flow. So you change your position of your, what you call this, list item, and then it will change dynamically from the Firestore. All right. So, and another thing that I want to share also is this thing called Provider 4.1. So if you notice, Provider has already been updated to 4.1. So I have with me here a counter app that says Provider 4.1 sneak peek, right? So the thing about the current provider is that the author, Remy, right? He used the extension for the build context. So now you can use these three methods: watch, select, and one more is called read. So I'm going to share with you on what are the different functions or methods that you can use in the new provider package. So instead of having like provider of context, right? So I think this is a bit too big. Let me zoom out a bit more. Okay. So for example, if I were to just comment this and then comment this. Normally what you will do is you will have provider of, for example, counter notifier and then context. And then you'll probably have your methods inside your counter notifier. Okay, before I explain the what do you call that, the different or the new things in provider package, I will just explain to you what this app is. So it's a simple counter app. If you click on it, yeah, it will just increase accordingly. So I use change notifier for me to have this interaction. So inside my what do you call this, counter notifier over here, what it does is it's very simple. You just have your initial value, which is 0, and then you have a getter method, and then at the same time you have a increment method over here, where it just use the increment operator to increase your value, and then it notifies listener because it will update the UI accordingly. So I have a very simple counter notifier over here. So I use this counter notifier or change notifier I have inside of my app over here. Then what you normally will do is that you will have provider of change counter notifier context, blah, blah, blah. And then for like an increment function, you will use listen. So that this parameters called listen equal to false, right? This is basically mean that for this part of the, what do you call this, counter notifier, you are not updating it because it's just a function. So a function doesn't need any updates. It just does stuff. So you will probably use listen false for any functions, but for any data, for example, the counter over here, right, you will probably need to listen to any updates, right? So that is just one thing that I want to point out, because there will be something later on that I will share with you guys. So now the next thing is that you will have this thing called watch. So counter context.watch counter notifier over here. So what this does is the same as provider.off. So let me see. So it's the same thing as provider.off, and then you have your context over here. Right? Oops. So it's the same as this, but now using the extension method that Remy implemented in the new provider, you can just use this. So watch, what it does is it obtains a value of your provider, and then yeah, it is the same as this. It's literally the same. And watch, what it does, it reads and writes. So it reads and writes. It reads and updates accordingly. So the next, so you can use this counter to just put in, like, for example, counter dot value to string. So it's the same thing as any other providers that you have called in. The next thing is this thing called select. So what select does is it only selects a particular property or method that you want to use. So you have context.select, and then you will have for example, a provider, you will have the data that you want to pass in. For example, I have another class that's called bigger counter notifier. So the difference is that it will increment twice. All right. So in this select, you can just select a specific type of, like, for example, property, right? So inside counter, you can just put this in select. Let me. So no, okay, then select. Then after that, the value can be the counter notifier itself. Oops. Oops, what? Okay. All right, this is okay. Sorry, I'm using a new keyboard. Bear with me over here. And then you can put it counter notifier. And then you can specifically just return for example, the value over here. So what this select does, it only updates only gives you what you want, and you can also manipulate it accordingly. So you can put this into a block body, and then at the same time you can return it dot to string. So you can have this kind of manipulation or changed kind of data inside, rather than you putting another variable for you to like change the, what do you call that, the counter into a string. So this is helpful if you really just want a specific property inside your change notifier, or even any type of objects that you're listening to. Right, so the last one, right, is called watch. So let me control Z. Okay, sorry, the last one is called context.read. So this context.read is a bit, how do I say this? It's something that it's something that it's a bit, basically I need to explain further. So what I mean by context.read, where is my context.read? Wait. Oh no. Okay, yeah. Okay, so over here, I have my multi-provider, right? So I use change notifier provider so that my homepage or this screen can listen to the different notifier. At the same time, I have another what do you call this object called bigger counter notifier. So what it does that it increase the value by 2. So from 4 to 6, for example. So there is this, maybe you want to have the counter notifier, for example, you want it to use the increment method. So what you need to do is you need to pass in the context using the read, what do you call it, method. So this read method, right, is basically how you are able to use a method from a different, for example, provider. So you pass in a context.read, and then inside your, for example, object over here or your class, right, you'll use this thing called locator. So locator is just a type definition or a shortcut for you to say, oh, you're returning a function with a type. So it's usually used with the read method over here. So with this locator, then you can specifically say what kind of provider or change notifier you're listening to. So I'm listening to counter notifier. So I'm using its increment method. Then I have this method called add twice. So if I were to use this add twice method, I will actually increase its current value over here, but without me having to, use the counter notifier itself. I just use this locator, which is passed in through this context.read method. So yeah. So basically, you don't need to. This is how you get a method from a provider without having to pass in a context, basically. So with that, I'm going to use it, and I'm just going to not use the increment method and use this increment method instead. So as you can see over here, oh, no, not this one. Right. So I have this thing called add, and then I use this context.select method, and then I add twice what do you call this method that I've created inside my bigger counter notifier. So I'm going to copy this add method over here and paste it over here. So if I were to save this, and now my current value is 5, right? So if I press this, it will become 8. Wait, 11. What does this add do? Increase by 3. Oh my god, what happened? All right, so yeah, it increased by 3. Let me restart this whole app again. It should be only increasing by 2. So 4. So increase by 3. Okay, I need to debug. But you get the point, right? You get the point. Basically, what it does is you help. For this context.read, it helps you to get the counter or any kind of object method using the provider method without using the context. Without using the context. Yep. Okay, so I think that's about it for providers. Okay, so this is just like a comparison of what are the different providers that I've gone through. So provider simply just gives data to the widget tree easily. Then multi-provider gives the data from a list of providers bundled into one provider, and then it will shove it into the widget tree. Then for stream provider, it just listens to a stream and then provides a result to the widget tree. So it's the stream builder plus provider itself. Then for this change notifier, it holds a state. Change notifier is some sort of a state management, and then it updates the user when the user interacts. So it updates the UI with the notify listener function. So change notifier provider just provides the state that the change notifier is holding and the updates that it is holding also. So it sends the data from change notifier to the widget. Proxy provider, it does not hold any state, so it just updates accordingly where whatever data that's listening to, for example, Firestore or even any API service that suddenly updates itself. And then lastly, change notifier proxy provider, it holds a state and then it updates when user interacts and when the data is listening. So it updates when the user interacts and when a change of data from a service is updated also. All right, so that's about it. Thank you. Right, I'm. If you guys have any questions, put it inside Facebook or even YouTube. Subscribe to my channel at The Happy Harris. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. It was pretty useful, like one more state management pattern. Guys, please post, ask any questions in YouTube. And maybe I will ask again the very first one. Why do you prefer to use providers and not, why don't you use blocks or Redux?
All right, so provider, like I say, it's not I think I never mentioned it. So provider is not a state management. So provider is just a tool for you to pass down data from for example, your top of the widget tree down to the different widgets. So change notifier is not part of the provider package, but it's a simple state management that the Flutter team have implemented. So then Remy saw that, oh, change notifier is actually simple. So why not have this thing called change notifier provider to make use of this change notifier, what do you call that, state management kind of widget. Yeah.
So do you use the provider or you use something else on top of provider? So
for me, I don't use block or Redux because I haven't gone that level of, or maybe because like you say, I'm like the oldest kind of Flutter developer that you might have known. Before the actual block package was created, I had to create the block package itself, manually. So it wasn't the actual block package, but it was some sort of like inherited widget plus a little bit of the block logic, and then I have to create the inherited widget itself. So I guess that was the highest level of like state management I have used before, and that was a lot of maintenance, a lot of boilerplate code, which I really don't like. And then I have to do with streams and what do you call that? What's streams and sinks? So I have to deal with streams and sinks. So I have to learn RX Dart also at the same time. So it was a lot of things going on. Yeah.
Okay. Then thank you. Guys, if you would have any questions by the end of all presentations, by the last, we will ask one more time to ask questions for any speakers. So thank you. Let's move on. Yeah. Hi, Evgeny.
Hello, German. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So Evgeny is our the first foreigner speakers for the first online meetup. So Evgeny is from Russia, and also I saw like there are some questions like I'm also from Russia. Like I'm not German anyway. So Evgeny, what are you talking about?
Today we are going to discuss what just a regular developer, as all of us, should do to become a good or maybe a perfect Flutter developer.
Okay.
I will share you my experience. Maybe it will be useful for you. Who knows?
I think personally to me it will be super useful. I'm manager in my company. I work in Grep in Singapore, and now it's exact challenge that we have how we can help our developers to learn Flutter. So yeah, please go on. I'm happy to learn new stuff. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, German. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Eugene Saturov, and I'm a Flutter team lead and Flutter developer at Surf. I'm from Russia, as German already mentioned, and to be honest, that is my first English talk ever. So thank you for having me on your meetup, and let's go. Here on this slide, you can see a map, and on this map, you can see where I am. And there are something about 8,000 kilometers between you and me, between Singapore and Russia. So good morning, everybody. We have 10 a.m. here now. And let me say a couple of words about my company. Surf is middle-sized mobile development studio, and we are focusing on building mobile solutions for business. Most of our clients are banks and big e-commerce services, big e-commerce companies. And the most of our history, we did only native mobile applications, both for Android and for iOS. And we never had a single cross-platform application in our portfolio, but then Flutter appeared. And what about me? Personally, in addition to my main job, I'm also a hoster of a Flutter Dev podcast. This is the only Russian podcast about Flutter and everything what surrounded. Moreover, I'm a program committee member of Mobius. Mobius is the largest mobile conference in Russia, and feel free to apply your papers. We'll be happy to see you in Russia with your talks. Finally, I'm a Google developer group leader in my hometown in Voronezh. We're organizing meetups, workshops, dev fests, and so on. So what we are going to talk about today. First, we need to find out what challenges are standing on the way of a newbie Flutter developer. Everything that you're probably afraid of thinking about. Then we will decide that the only way to achieve the goal and to get to the top, to become a good Flutter developer, is to systematize all this knowledge about the framework and to try to present it in some kind of visual form. I will show you what we did. And finally, I will cover such a topic as being an open source contributor, because, surprise, this can really push your level up and inspire you for the next movements. And I will show you our self-made Flutter library set with an examples. I will show you our architectural framework. Okay. 7 months ago, my life changed dramatically, because before I was Android developer for 5.5 years. And it was not an easy decision to switch to Flutter, but an amazing time after it, because everything was completely new for me. Everything was unknown for me, despite I'm still a mobile developer. And the plan was pretty clear, was crystal clear for me. I need just get more practice and get some deep knowledge of the language and the framework. What I really need to learn is Dart as a language and Flutter as a framework, and nothing else. How wrong I was. Then everything changed drastically when I got my first iOS build crash for some unknown reason for me. I ran Xcode for the first time in my life. I never did it before. Pressed different buttons. Something happens here and there, but I had really no idea what to do and how to fix this issue we experienced. The next week, we got an issue with a Swift code, because we used third-party library for handling permissions, for handling runtime permissions on Android and iOS. And of course, this library, this package had an issue connected with Swift part. And that was my first Swift lesson, because, yeah, you know, Swift looks similar to Kotlin and to other modern languages, but you can hardly write anything acceptable without knowing the core principles, syntax, without understanding the basic concepts of this language, because you have really a lot of questions about what's going on in this code, and you don't know nothing about it. And finally, I don't want to remember my first try to deploy iOS applications to test flight, to Firebase app distribution. For those who ever tried to do it without being iOS developer originally, you probably know what I mean. All these provisioning profiles, certificates, test flights, whatever, I don't know, pod install command. Sometimes it seemed to me that all of this was invented by the devil. And it became pretty clear for me that it won't be that easy. And surely I need to leave my comfort zone and to get some knowledge in some really new areas for me personally, such as iOS. And it's really not enough to keep in touch with Flutter and Dart. You should at least understand the basic concepts of all platforms you are targeting on. For example, Android and Kotlin or Java, iOS and Swift or Objective-C languages. You shouldn't be afraid of the process of deploying applications. You should be familiar with such tools like Google Play, Console, App Store Connect, Test Flight, and so on. And I think you all know that Flutter is not just a mobile cross-platform framework. And I hope that in the close future, I will see a rise of Flutter for web and Flutter for desktop. Just imagine how cool it would be to be able to build applications for all of these platforms from the single code base in a click. But every new target platform will surely add complexity to your project and will make even more demands on the depth of your experience, because now maybe you have you may not know nothing about web technologies or desktop operation systems, and that's probably your next step. In my company, typical Flutter developers look like this guy. This is Flutter man at Surf. Yeah, I know that one single person can be specialist in all of these areas, but this is just an aggregated image of all of our 12 members of our team. We have one of the largest Flutter teams at our country. And as you can see, the core of our team are Flutter developers, a really huge amount of them, because at least every Android developer at Surf sometimes dream about throwing it all away and became a happy Flutter developer. And 8 of our 12 developers have Android background in the past. But we also have guys who previously did React Native applications, JavaScripters, even backenders or Delphi developers. That's really amazing how different people with completely different background can share their opinions on the same things and being a part of one single team. And in the Tenosphere that provides us ready-made Flutter developers, I really don't know nothing about it, because every developer in our team are ex-someone. But at this moment, you might ask yourself, stop, okay, that's great, but what should I do to become a good Flutter developer? And you're the lucky guys, because there are a huge variety of ways now. You can start some video courses, you can buy some books, you can go through some paid practical courses, which you can find everywhere in the internet right now. Even Googling and surfing around the web is an option for you. And of course, official docs, because Flutter has really perfect documentation that can teach you a lot. If we talk about video courses, I can recommend you try one of Udacity course for free, because it's absolutely free. It is official course from Googlers, from the Flutter team. It's very quick and it's high quality, because all you need to know about Flutter basics, you can find here in this course. Another option for you is the App Brewery course. It is not so expensive, just about $10 US. And unlike the previous one, it's really huge. It has more than 23 hours of HD video included. But some times ago, they released the free part of this course, so you can have tried this. And of course, I can't recommend you anything better than absolutely free official YouTube channel of Flutter, because they have a lot of shows here. I hope I don't need to describe you all of them. You can find these shows here using this link on the slide. If you never saw anything, just give it a try. Just watch something tonight. What about books? Books are not an easy story for me, really, because I'm a big books fan. I know that paper smell and everything, but I can't imagine what a perfect book for such a fast-changing topic as Flutter is. Most of these books are expensive enough, to be honest, but they can share you anything deep knowledges and or even interesting for you that you can't find in free web resources, in Medium blog posts, in Twitter, somewhere else. But if you're still book addict person like me, just take a look on Flutter in Action book, because if you buy an electronic copy of this book, you will get regular updates forever. and that can keep this book up to date for a long time. And of course, code samples, because it is the best way to learn something is to stop reading about it, is to stop learning some theory and to get to practice, to start coding by yourself, to implement something really interesting, valuable, useful. And if you have no possibility to start to write Flutter applications, not leaving your current job, not leaving your current company, maybe you have no Flutter projects, you have no Flutter developer position here, but you're very interested in this topic, you can start with digging through the tons of ready-made sample applications you can find following these links, just Googling, or maybe you can implement your own pet project you ever dream about, and to share this pet project with all the community. And this is really great. And yes, okay, I promised you to show our little project that help us systematize all of this big amount of information. Now it's time to do it. Please welcome to Flutter Developer Roadmap. But first, I need to ask a question. Why do we need it? Why do we need to implement this roadmap? And there are a couple of reasons. We had no idea how to grade our developers. We have 12 developers, but we need to know more about their current level and how to help them to push their level up. But we had also no educational course at all. We have educational courses for Android developers, for iOS developers, for project managers, for everybody, but not for Flutter developers because it's kind of fresh technology. And we had not even a plan how to do it, how to implement this course. Because the reason was we never saw a full picture of the whole framework and what's around it. Yeah, I know that documentation is still extremely good and extremely useful and well-structured, but you can walk through from page to page forever and still have no idea what you should learn next and how much things you should learn in future and how much things you already know. And yeah, take a look at this. This roadmap is so huge that there is no way to fit it on a single page of my presentation, but don't be afraid. I'm going to describe it in details on the next few slides, and you will get a link to which you can follow, and you can find this roadmap on the GitHub. It is in early stage of development, but you can already check it out. But now let's roll it horizontally. Yeah, that's much better. And I will cover the main parts of this roadmap here on that screen. Let's start with the biggest part, UI. You can see it in a blue bubble here. I like to think about Flutter as about UI first framework. And it's not a surprise for me that the most of its complexity is here in this layer, in this bubble. Absolutely fantastic numbers of different widgets. Most of them are in two variants, Material and Cupertino widgets. All of them, or almost all of them, were systematized in that branch. Widgets, layouts, animations, working with resources and assets, localization, animations, gesture detections, what's more. You can find everything here. And I believe that you should at least know the basics of every topic I mentioned before to be able to build quality applications using Flutter. And there are some extra parts in this branch, like custom rendering and custom layouting. They are not mandatory for you on your first step, but they also can be really useful for you in the future. The next section you can see on the right side in a green bubble contains everything you should know to build a business logic part of your application. All about asynchronous separation handling, all about networking requests, and response parsing, mapping to your Dart objects, and so on. And finally, everything about state management and about file storages and data storages in general, you can find here in this branch. On the top, you can see two bubbles, two small bubbles called basics, and another bubble called basics, or called tools and CI. I really can hardly imagine how you can write anything without knowing some basics in mobile development. Now, that can be not so easy for web developers or backend developers, maybe. But I hope that material design and human interface design guidelines are not just an empty words for you. And what about tools and CI? In my opinion, you should really be familiar with some tools that helps you to develop applications like Android Studio, Xcode, VS Code. You should understand the concept of Gradle build system, Xcode build, and a lot of other platform-specific tools. And of course, you should keep in mind what is the most useful CI/CD tool for your project, because you have different alternatives now. CodeMagic, for example, which is paid but absolutely perfect and easy to use. Or Jenkins, which is free, open source solution, but can take your time and can need some more resources to run. And I missed one thing that is small, but very, very important. It's called internals. And you should really know nothing about internals on your first step. And you can develop perfect quality applications using Flutter without knowing how it really works under the hood. But if you want not just being another Flutter developer, but became a really valuable specialist, you should probably try to dive deeper and to know something about Dart virtual machine and Flutter internals. You can find some information in this branch. So, but don't be afraid, please don't be afraid, because I'm gonna, because I recommend you to take into consideration that the goal is not to cover everything at once. It's impossible, I suppose. It's absolutely impossible. So I provide you a mini version of this roadmap on this slide, and it contains only top level nodes of every branch, and it allows you to find your starting point in any of your desired knowledge area you want to level up yourself, and you can start digging by yourself in the right direction. And you can separate this roadmap on two parts. The left side called framework, and you can find everything that I mentioned before, and the right side is basics and tools, and you can find really a lot of information about testing your applications, adding Flutter parts to your native applications, both Android and iOS. You can find some information about writing platform-specific code, about all these method channels, and so on. So Flutter Developer Roadmap is free for everyone. It's fully open source. As I mentioned before, it is in early development stage. Some parts of it still written in Russian, but we will translate it as soon as we can. And that's great that you can use as you want. You can modify it as you want. You can download file that you can open in different software like FreeMind. FreeMind is an application that is completely free for everybody, and you can run it on macOS, on Windows, on Unix, everywhere you want. And you can modify it. You can add your own branches. You can remove branches you don't need. It's really interesting what you can do with that, and if it can be useful for you. So I will be glad for everybody who will bring me some feedback about it. Maybe not just after this talk, but in the future. I will leave you my contacts, and you can write me directly anytime you want. Okay, but what about open source? At the very beginning of my talk, I promised you to tell how contributing to open source projects can push you level up, and it's now time to do it. But again, you can ask me, why do I need to spend my time on it? To spend some time doing some strange things for some strangers, for somebody who you will never know personally, for free. Yeah, you will get no money for that. I will ask you why. There are a couple of reasons I really like, because as for me, from my point of view, being an open source contributor is the easiest way to start doing something by yourself. Even if you're not a professional Flutter developer, even if you're working with some other technologies, you can you can every time do whatever you want, and you can start your own pet project, maybe open source project, and to improve your skills in the desired technology. Another reason is that being an open source contributor is the fastest way to get valuable feedback from the community, because you really you know that we all building some tools for us that helps us in our everyday life. We're all sometimes writing some libraries, useful packages we reuse between our projects, but it always takes a lot of time to test these packages, to find the right solutions, to find all edges that we need to cut. And you know that community, people in community can quickly become testers of your solution, and also absolutely for free. They can find a lot of bugs you'll never notice and issues, and they can report them to you or even fix it. You can merge their pull requests they made to your repository, and it's great, I think. And another reason, but not the last, that working on the open source project is the shortest way to improve your skills in technologies you never tried before, because we never had enough freedom in technology stack selection at work. Sometimes we work with legacy code base we actually hate, but in our own project, we are free to select technologies and do whatever you want with these technologies. But not only this. We have also another reasons to make open source solutions in our company, because we at Surf involved in this process nearly every day, and it can really give us profit. Yeah, I talk about money and time, because we at Surf work on a huge number of different applications at the same time. We have 12 developers, as I already mentioned, and we suddenly spend a lot of time solving the same issues again and again and again and again between projects. And this is frustrating thing. We don't need to spend so much time on solving the issues that were already solved in the past in another project. We need to share our code base. We need to share our experience. It's not the way we can work effectively. We need to reuse things. And building an open source solution is the way that you can do this. And this how Surf Gear appeared. Surf Gear is a library set of packages for all occasions you can imagine in your Flutter developer life. You can follow this link. I think I will share the presentation after this meetup for everybody. You can click this link on every slide, and you can look. You can take a look by yourself on this repository. Sorry, but this repo is also in an early development stage now, but some descriptions and docs are still not written or written in Russian, but you can find also English documentation in some of the packages, but this surely will be fixed soon. And on the next two slides, you can see the full list of all of our packages. And I need to notice you that all of these links are clickable. You can follow these links and go to the repo of all of these packages. And we also have plans to make repo more developer friendly in the close future. We will make GitHub pages using Flutter for web, maybe in a week or two. By the way, I have a question for all of you listening and watching to this live translation. What packages of this list do you want to know more about? Maybe something you're interested. I can prepare another talk about using them specifically and come back to you if German will invite me again someday. So feel free to write it on Facebook or YouTube. Yeah, this is another slide with the second part of our packages list. I'm going to tell you about 3 of these packages next slides. I'm not going to tell about all of them because I need at least 3 more time slots during this meetup to have enough time to describe all of them. We have no such slots. And my favorite packages are analytics package. You can see on the first slide. Another useful package is data list. And the third is maybe the most important package for all of our developers at Surf is MWWM. Yeah, this is not a mistake because it is a variety of MVVM architectural pattern, but we translate it like model, widget model. And this is the basic core package that is in the basic layer of all of our application we build at Surf. But first, let's talk about analytics package. I really love the idea of this package because it solves the important problem of high complexity that different analytics services can bring to your code base easily. I saw a lot of projects with not a single analytics services included. For example, Google Analytics and Firebase Analytics, or Amplitude and Firebase Analytics, or something else I never heard before with Firebase Analytics. And this library is supposed to work to unify work with various analytics services, and the main actors are analytic action performer, and analytic service you can find here. First of all, let's talk about analytic action. This is class that you can extend from to implement some valuable action that your user can go through while using your application. Usually, it's like this button was pressed, or the screen was opened, or something else. This is types of event, but the main all of these actions can be handled by analytic action performer. And here we come to the second part. We need to implement analytic action performer to be able to perform all of our actions, no matter if we have a single analytic service integrated to your application or not. Because a performer of specific actions used to encapsulate work with a certain analytic service. You can have one of them, you can have a couple of them, you can have tens of them, typically implemented by transforming analytic action into required formats, and finally calling a send or method of a third-party library of your analytic service or its analog. And finally, analytic service is a unified point for several analytic action performers. Okay, this was a quick introduction into this package. You can find more details following this link. Next, another nice package for me is data list. It is really easy conception. This package provides us a new data structure with some kind of smart collection with pagination support. And here you can see an abstract class data list, which is the basics of two implementations. We have two concrete implementations for offset limit pagination and another for page limit pagination, but they have some common abilities. First of all, you can store your lists in a data, and sometimes you are able to get some information if you can get more data in your pagination list or not. And another useful methods you can implement into your implementations are merge and transform. Merge bring you an ability to merge new portion of data items after the successful loading them with the original collection, handling all conflicts accurately. This is quite important case, and sometimes you can just forget handling it properly. And even transformations are possible with implementations of transform method. You can transform your collection of items of one type to collection of items of another type using this transform method. Here on the next slide, you can see two implementations. These are just code snippets with the main properties you can work with. On the left side, you can see page count data list implementation. And on the right side, you can see offset limit data list code snippet implementation. That was another quick introduction. And you can find more details following this link on this slide. Feel free to do it and feel free to give some feedback about it. By the way, this package is fully covered with unit tests. So you can be be brave and use it in production. And finally, another nice library and maybe the most important for everybody in our team is MWWM. This is a variation of MVVM pattern, and you can build your application on top of this package, because this package brings you all abstractions you may need to build some business logic components, to build some screens with high complex business logic and data flows. So I will make another quick introduction. I have no time to talk about every detail of our architectural pattern, because this is a topic for another separate talk for 30 or 40 minutes. But now I can only introduce you this package. We can 3 layers in our architectural pattern. The first layer is widget, another is widget model, which is tied to the widget layer, and the third is model. Okay, and MVVM in general is based on principles of clean architecture, and it consists of these 3 parts. First part is widget. Widget is a representation layer, and widget usually contains only UI-related code. It can't contain any business logic. Only super simple logic like if is loading state true, show loader. In case that it false, show content or error. Only this kind of logic you can find here in the widget layer. And what you can find in this layer is just a simple widget trees, declarative UI. I have really nothing to talk about in this layer because it is super standard, and you can find similar things in every Flutter applications, no matter what architectural patterns they are based on. But the more interesting part is widget model layer. Widget model is a layer that handles and accumulates all data needed for our widgets. Because from one side, there are objects of the domain layer, scroll positions, text field values, animation states, etc. And from another side, we have user, which can tap on the button, it can scroll the screen, which can swipe something, which can pull to refresh your data, which can stop your application finally, I know, whatever. And we need to handle all of these input events and to change our data layer some way. Yeah, and the model is the third layer, and it is the most complex and interesting for me because model is a link between widget model and the external world. What I mean by external world, a lot of different things. For example, data sources, services, servers, and other abstraction layers, and other applications, another process on your device, I don't know. This layer allows you to develop both separately and have possibility to modify one layer with no need for changing the other. And where is complexity, you may ask me? And another useful package I never mentioned before, called relations, fits good with this MWWM package, because we have two kinds of relations we can use for systematizing and structuring our business logic flows. First called change, and another called performer. You can really implement any change you want, and you can really implement performers for handling these changes. But what's actually change is? Change is a signal to model, which means that we want to do something, that we want to achieve something. For example, we want to make a network request before user swipe and pull to refresh. But change know nothing about how actually to do that action. We know only intention. Change can handle some properties or can handle no properties. Depends on the case you use it. But what is performer? Performer is a guy who knows how to achieve the change we want to achieve. And the performer need to react on some changes that we need to intend from widget model to our model layer. So performer, you can think about it like about small interactors, like about small pieces of business logic that you can implement, that you can test properly, and yeah, this is super easy and super clear, I think. But I think that we have no time to get into the all of the details. We can discuss about MWWM package, and you can see code samples following this link. You can build your own application with MWWM in the basic layer, and of course you can feel free to share your opinion about it, to give me feedback about it. And it was an extremely quick introduction to what our framework can help you with. Feel free to text me, to direct messages anywhere, on Facebook, on Twitter, or you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can write me in Telegram using my nickname. I will answer your questions if you will have some. And now, thank you for attention.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. I think we have a few questions.
Okay, I will try to answer if I can.
Fernanda, would you recommend to learn Flutter without programming background?
Why not? Why not? I think that Flutter concept is more clear than native mobile frameworks. I know that Android framework is rather complex for newbies, but Flutter is not so complex. And I know examples when guys made courses for children, and they try some Flutter applications. They do some simple screens. They make some navigation from screen to screen. It looks super cool. for me, and yeah, I can recommend you to learn Flutter without programming. It would not be so easy. You should certainly you should learn your language first of all, and maybe you should start with some kind of more simple languages like Java. I don't know. I like Java, and then move to Dart. Up to you.
Okay, and I think we have one more last question. Maybe very, very quickly, you can just give ideas where to look into. So the question is, what is the difference between standard map and transform in data list package, and how the merge method merges list? Is it using some primary key or some another way?
Yeah, okay, let's start with the second part. What about merge method? It depends on your implementation, but if we speak about our implementations in our two cases, yeah, we need some way to detect the unique items that can prove us if there are any conflicts in these parts or not. Yeah, we use, let me remember, we use hash code to detect these items. So we need, we don't need some primary keys actually for that. We can compare some items between each other and then decide what part of list we need to merge and what part of the list we need to cut. And another question about transformation. Transform, you can really use map function if you want. This was this package was ported from Kotlin, and we need that function for some reason there. But this is just an alternative for the map function, and you feel free to use whatever is more comfortable for you.
Okay. Thank you, Evgeny, for your talk. Guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to post them maybe in comments, in Telegram channel, so in Twitter. Yeah. So thanks, everyone. Last item from my side. So if you have ideas for the future talks, please drop me a message in Twitter, Telegram. You can go to Telegram channel in Flutter Singapore Meetup page on meetup.com. So I think we're good today. Thanks to Evgeny, Happy Harris, Joe for your talks, and thanks for Joe for support from Google Developer Space in Singapore for helping organizing this. So thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.